Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any video lesson from RAU'S Study Circle. Hello and welcome to the Daily News Simplified, an analysis of the Hindu newspaper from UPSC perspective. Today we will discuss the daily edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 27th August 2020. Now in our weekly series of the mains question assignment from the DNS, the question for today's assignment is: it is difficult to achieve the objectives and the goals of the new education policy approved by the Union Cabinet without amending the Right of Children to Free and Compulsory Education Act 2009. Examine, and this question is for 15 marks and 250 words. So this question has been created based on the DNS of 7th August 2020 from the discussion title, Can the National Education Policy Fix Access to Universal Education? And you may watch the discussion before writing your answer on the ELEARN platform here. So in the description of the video, there is a link of the question assignment where you can participate in the discussion on the RAU'S ELEARN platform. However, you need to take care of some important things here. First is that you can type the answer in the comment box, or you can click the image in a JPG file and send your answers to us. And all those who will send their answers by Saturday will get the evaluation and feedback from the RAU'S teachers. Post your answers in portrait mode only. And thirdly, you should not post your answer in someone else's answer. Use the comment box or post your answers at the bottom of the thread to submit your answer to the main thread. Fourthly, try to keep a tab on the time taken and mention the time taken for you to write your answer in your answer sheet on the top right hand side. You can also mention the city and the state from where you are posting your answer, and this will help us in knowing that the students are benefiting across India and DNS is reaching every nook and corner of the country. And the articles that we will discuss today are displayed on your screen. So let us start our discussion. Now this article on page number 7 talks about the outer space, and it is said that the outer space has been the arena of most memorable demonstrations since the Second World War. So in this, the author has highlighted that the Russian Sputnik, which was the first artificial space satellite, and the American Apollo 11, which landed on the moon, were seen as symbols of geopolitical competitions during the Cold War era. And even during the COVID pandemic, a lot of space-related activity has taken place. So this highlights that the outer space is witnessing unprecedented activity now. However, the outer space does not have clearly defined treaties, and in this, the treaties that govern the outer space are obsolete in nature. So in this article, let us try and understand what are the challenges in fulfilling the potential of the space and what are the issues with the present treaties and the legal framework. And this can be a very important topic for us from the General Studies paper 3 point of view under the topic Science and Technology. Now in this regard, even during the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of space-related activity has taken place. And some of the important recently launched space missions include the Tianwen-1, which is the Chinese Mars mission, the Hope Orbiter, which is the UAE's Mars mission, and also a 6-wheeled rover named Perseverance was launched by United States of America. Also, the first astronaut trip to orbit on a commercial or a private enterprise was built by SpaceX was also launched during this time. And China has launched its satellite navigation system, which is known as the BIDO. Further, USA has said that Russia has conducted a non-destructive test of space-based anti-satellite weapon. So all these space missions which have taken place during the COVID-19 pandemic can become important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. So all these missions highlight that the outer space is witnessing unprecedented activity. And in this regard, let us look at the current status of space industry and how it is likely to grow in the future. Now in this, the costs for sending missions in the space are decreasing rapidly. And in this, the cost of space missions have dropped by 10 times in the last decade. And accordingly, the NASA's space shuttle used to cost about $54,500 per kilogram. However, the private enterprise SpaceX's Falcon 9 has said that the cost for launching 1 kg of the space satellite will cost about $2,720 only. And the projection is that in the coming decade, the cost of space shuttle could cost less than $100 per kilogram. So this shows that the cost of sending space missions is declining considerably, and accordingly, a lot of activity is going to be witnessed in the future in the outer space. And these reduced prices are enhancing the human space travel possibilities by leveraging new commercial capabilities. And according to a Bank of America report, the present space market stands at about $350 billion, and it is expected to touch about $2.7 trillion by 2050. So this shows the immense amount of growth in the space market that is going to take place in the future. Further, the SpaceX, which is a private enterprise, is launching the Starlink, which will be a constellation of satellites and which will include 10,000 mass produced small satellites in the low Earth orbit. And they aim at providing global internet access. So they basically aim at bridging the digital divide and providing everyone and everywhere access to services such as education and telemedicine, which are all dependent upon internet. So accordingly, this Starlink mission of the SpaceX, which aims at bridging the digital divide, becomes important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. Again, Amazon's Project Kuiper will launch more than 3,000 microsatellites, and the projection is that about 80,000 such satellites could be in space compared to the present 3,000. So this shows that the outer space is likely to witness unprecedented activity in the near future. However, as the outer space is becoming democratized, commercialized, and crowded, the multilateral framework for its governance is becoming obsolete, according to the author. And that is mainly because most of the treaties which govern the outer space were finalized in 1960s and 70s, which was also the Cold War era. So in this background, let us look at the treaties that govern the outer space, and after that we will look at the issues that are there with these treaties. So regarding the outer space treaties, there are 5 United Nations treaties which relate to activities in the outer space. And the primary treaty which governs the outer space is the Outer Space Treaty of 1967. Besides the Outer Space Treaty, the other 4 include the Rescue Agreement of 1968, the Liability Convention of 1972, the Registration Convention of 1975, and the Moon Agreement of 1979. Now, this Rescue Agreement of 1968 requires the states to assist an astronaut in case of an accident, distress, emergency, or unintended landing. Secondly, the Liability Convention of 1972 establishes the standards of liability for damage caused by space objects. And the Registration Convention of 1975 requires the states to register all the objects which are launched into the outer space with the United Nations. And finally, the Moon Agreement elaborates on the provisions of the Outer Space Treaty as they apply to the Moon and other celestial bodies. So this is basically an extension of the Outer Space Treaty of 1967. Now regarding India's status, India has signed all 5 treaties but has ratified only 4 of them. And in this regard, the Moon Agreement is yet to be ratified by India. So this can be another important aspect for us from the preliminary examination point of view. Now regarding the Outer Space Treaty of 1967, you should note that it is the international treaty which binds the parties to use the outer space only for peaceful purposes. So basically this is a binding treaty on all the parties. So this treaty basically prohibits nations from placing nuclear arms or other weapons of mass destruction in the orbit, on the moon, or on other bodies in the space. Secondly, nations cannot claim sovereignty over the moon or other celestial bodies. Also, nations are responsible for their activities in the space and are liable for any damage which is caused by objects that are launched into the space from their territory and are bound to assist astronauts in distress. Further, the space installations and vehicles shall be open on a reciprocal basis to representatives of other countries, and nations cannot establish military bases or installations or test any type of weapons or conduct military exercises on the moon and other celestial bodies. However, the outer space is still used for transit of weapons and military satellites. So basically, this Outer Space Treaty provides that the outer space can be used only for peaceful purposes and militarization of the outer space will not be allowed. Also, the countries cannot colonize the space. That is, they cannot claim the sovereign rights over a particular celestial body or the space of a celestial body. So for example, if United States of America aims at creating or carving out a space for itself on the moon, it is not allowed under this Outer Space Treaty of 1967. Let us look at some of the issues and the issues with the legal framework with these treaties. So now regarding the issues with these treaties, the author says that the space law does not have a dispute settlement mechanism. Further, the space law is also silent on collisions and the debris that are created in the space. And also, the space treaties do not take care of interference that is done by other space assets or the space assets of other countries. Now, as there is lack of quality on the interference by the space assets of other countries, also there is lack of dispute settlement mechanism, and also as the treaties are silent on collisions and debris, there is heightened potential for a conflict in the era of congested space orbits. Secondly, the legal framework under these treaties is mainly state centric, that is, it only takes care of the activities by the governments of the countries. And as such, these treaties place responsibility only on the states. However, now as we note that non-state entities or private enterprises are now entering into the exploration and utilization of the space, and accordingly, such legal framework is not sufficient to govern the private enterprises that are entering the space. Further, the author says that the space arms race is inevitable, and that is because although the Outer Space Treaty stands against the militarization of the space, various satellites which are launched by the countries are used for military purposes. Also, recently Russia has conducted a non-destructive test of a space-based anti-satellite weapon, and in India's Mission Shakti, we also tested an anti-satellite mission. So these examples highlight that the space arms race is inevitable. And despite the concerns about military activity in the outer space, not much progress has been made in addressing these military activity concerns. Now, in this regard, various initiatives were started to counter the space arms race. However, these initiatives have not made any progress. So, in this regard, the author highlights the need for a space regulation for India. And that is mainly because India has already invested enormous resources in the space assets. And we note that India's Space Research Organization is actively involved in various space missions. Also, India has ambitious future plans regarding the outer space, and India is aiming at landing on the moon. It is also aiming at launching the first Indian solar observatory and also first crewed orbital space flight mission. Again, India aims at installation of a modular space station in 2030. So this shows that India has ambitious future plans. So while concluding, the author says that we need a space legislation which enables coherence across the technical, legal, commercial, diplomatic and defense goals. And our space vision also needs to address the global governance, regulatory and arms control issues. So these were few important points in which some of them are important for us from the preliminary examination point of view, while others are important for us from the mains examination point of view. With this, let's take up the next news article now. Now, this article on page number 6 talks about making the agricultural marketing reforms successful. And in this, the author has provided an approach as to how to make the reforms which were announced by the government of India in the Atmanirbhar Bharat package successful. So under the Atmanirbhar Bharat package, the government of India has decided to introduce agricultural marketing reforms. And some of these reforms include the amendments to the Essential Commodities Act, central legislation to promote interstate trading, legal framework to promote contract farming, etc. Now in the Atmanirbhar Bharat package, the announcements related to the agriculture were discussed in the DNS of 16th May 2020. So you should go through that DNS and try and understand the details of the reforms which were announced by the government of India. However, in this article, we will look at the suggestions that have been provided by the author and revise from the DNS of 28th May 2020, where we have already discussed the various issues related to the agricultural marketing in India and also the reforms that have been announced by the government of India related to agricultural marketing. And this can be a very important aspect for us from General Studies Paper 3 point of view under the topic Economic Development. So now, how to make the marketing reforms successful that have been announced by the government of India under its Atmanirbhar Bharat package. First and foremost is the consistency of policy by the government. And in this, the author says that there has always been lack of consistency in the government's policy towards agricultural marketing reforms. Now, what has been the impact of such inconsistency? So, it has failed to inspire the confidence in the private sector investors. And we note that for the improvement or development of agricultural sector, the private investment is one of the most important pillars. So, in this regard, the author is skeptical that even when the government of India has announced agricultural marketing reforms, and there is possibility that the government of India will keep on flip-flopping on the reforms that it has announced. Now, an example that has been quoted by the author for highlighting the lack of consistency in policy, the author says that the government initially tried to reform the marketing through setting up of the ENAM portal. However, due to the poor response of the states in amending their APMC acts to ensure the success of ENAM portal, the government was forced to come up with the PM Asha scheme. And the introduction of this scheme was later followed up with the introduction of PM Kisan scheme. So this shows that the government has been flip-flopping on the marketing reforms, and this has particularly impacted the investment by the private sector. Second issue that the author highlights is related to the collaborative governance. So in this regard, the author says that the government of India has recently introduced an ordinance to enable the farmers to sell the agricultural commodities anywhere throughout India and to whomsoever they want. So this is one of the major agricultural marketing reforms. However, the author says that the success of this reform that has been announced through the ordinance depends upon the free movement of agricultural commodities across multiple boundaries of different states. And as such, there is a need to ensure collaborative governance between the central government and the state government to ensure the success of these reforms that have been introduced through this ordinance. And finally, the author says that there is need for other complementary reforms which should be complementary to the already announced reforms by the government of India. And in this, the author says that the government needs to realize that these reforms alone cannot lead to increase in the income levels of the farmers. And these reforms must be complemented by a conducive ecosystem to ensure their success. So in this regard, the author says that the success of contract farming, for example, depends upon various other factors. And these include the consolidation of land holdings through land leasing, formation of farm producer organizations to enable the small farmers to reap the economies of scale, and also the success of interstate trading depends upon other factors, for example, increased market density, increased private sector investment, and linkages of the marketing with the ENAM portal. So accordingly, the government of India needs to implement further complementary reforms to make the recently announced reforms a success. Now, after looking at some of the suggestions and the concerns that have been raised by the author, let us revise from the DNS of 28th May 2020, where we have discussed the various issues with the agricultural marketing in India and also the reforms announced by the government of India. And if you go through the question paper of General Studies paper 3 of the mains examination of 2014, you will find that a question has already been asked related to the issues that affect the agriculture marketing due to the agricultural produce market committees that are set up under the various state government acts. And that is why this topic of agricultural marketing becomes very important for us from the mains examination point of view. So let us look at all the issues that affect the agricultural marketing sector in India. Now, we already know that agriculture is one of the largest enterprise in our country and it employs almost half of India's workforce. And in this regard, the government of India aims at doubling the farmers' income by the end of 2022. So in this background, it is said that poor marketing infrastructure in India is one of the biggest hurdles before the farmers for realizing the optimum prices on their agricultural produces. Further, we note that the agricultural production has been increasing continuously in the past few years. However, the increased agricultural production has neither benefited the farmers nor the end consumers. So on the one hand, the farmers continue to get lower prices, and on the other hand, the consumers continue to pay more money for their consumption. And this has been attributed to fragmented agricultural market, lack of integrated domestic market, and restrictions which are imposed on the storage, movement, and the sale of agricultural commodities. So in this background, let us look at the role which is played by the agricultural marketing for the farmers. Now, agricultural marketing in India has a much broader connotation and it includes all the activities in the procurement of farm inputs by the farmers as well as the movement of agricultural produce from farmland to the end consumers. Now, this covers broad range of activities which can include the storage, physical handling, transportation, primary processing, grading, packaging, and sale of agri commodities, etc. And that is why agricultural marketing involves all the aspects related to the agriculture. So in this background, an efficient agricultural marketing system is extremely critical for the growth of agriculture sector in our country. So the main role which is played by the agriculture marketing is that it enables the farmers to buy the agricultural inputs such as fertilizers, seeds, etc. at affordable prices. And this becomes important since the agricultural input costs have been increasing over a period of time. Further, it provides signals to the farmers with respect to the planning of sowing of the crops. And by making the use of market signals, the farmers would be able to grow those crops which are in high demand and get remunerative prices for the same. And a well-connected and an efficient market would also be able to address the issue of food inflation, since it would be able to match the supply with the demand for the food products. Thirdly, an integrated domestic marketing system would considerably reduce the price variations in the agricultural commodities across India. And this would enable the farmers to sell their produce anywhere in India, and they will be able to get the best prices for their agricultural produce. Further, according to a high-level expert committee which was constituted by the Ministry of Agriculture, it has estimated that 25 to 30% of the fruits and vegetables and up to 8 to 10% of the food grains are wasted annually due to lack of post-harvest technology and non-existence of integrated transport, storage and marketing facilities. And in this background, an efficient marketing infrastructure would enable the farmers to reduce their post-harvest losses. So an efficient marketing infrastructure is important for reducing the post-harvest losses and also improving the incomes of the farmers. Further, in India, there is a lot of scope for India to boost its export of agricultural commodities. However, India has failed to make optimum use of this opportunity, and in this regard, the agricultural marketing policies can act as an enabler for boosting the agricultural exports. So what is the role played by the agricultural marketing? First is that it will make the agricultural inputs easily available for the farmers. Second is that it will signal the farmers as to which crop needs to be grown by them so that they can earn good prices for those crops. Further, if there is an integrated domestic marketing system, it will considerably reduce the price variation in the agricultural commodities across India, and also it will reduce the post-harvest losses and improve the incomes for the farmers. Further, it can also lead to boosting of agricultural exports from India. So these are few important roles which are played by the agricultural marketing system in India. So after this, let us look at the evolution of agricultural marketing system in India and what are the associated problems with this agricultural marketing structure. Now, post-independence, the government's focus was mainly on providing the markets to the farmers and also the platform to trade their agricultural produce. However, the main aim of the government of India was to keep the prices under control. And accordingly, most of the state governments have enacted the Agricultural Produce Market Regulation Act or the APMC Acts. Now, you might be knowing that agriculture is a state subject, and hence APMC Acts have been enacted by the respective state governments. Now, based on these APMC Acts, the state governments set up and regulate the marketing of agricultural produce. Now, apart from this, there are more than 22,000 rural markets or the Grameen Hats which are under the control of local bodies, panchayats and APMCs, etc. Further, besides this, the Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs declares the minimum support prices for certain agricultural commodities based on the recommendations of Commission for Agricultural Cost and Prices. Now, this minimum support price is intended to act as demand signal for the farmers so that they can take up the cultivation of appropriate crops based upon the existing demand in the economy. So, for example, the Government of India declares the minimum support price for the crop of wheat. The farmers get the signal that they will at least get that minimum support price if they produce the wheat, and hence it provides them an idea as to which crop will fetch them good prices in the market. So accordingly, the minimum support price has also been designed. So this minimum support price incentivizes the farmers to invest in agriculture by assuring them of minimum returns. So that is the main role played by the minimum support price. So when we go through the existing agricultural marketing system in India, we find that there are Agricultural Produce Marketing Regulation Acts or the APMC Acts, which are enacted by the state governments. Then there are rural markets or the Grameen Hearts. And then there is the minimum support price, which is announced by the central government. So after this, let us look at what are the issues that are faced by the agricultural marketing structure in India. Now, regarding the problems that are faced by the agricultural marketing in India, it is said that when India adopted the liberalization, privatization and globalization reforms in 1991, it was expected that the agricultural marketing would also be liberalized. However, the government failed to bring out reforms in the agricultural marketing in tune with the changed market environment. And agricultural marketing continues to be plagued by problems such as fragmented supply chain, poor marketing infrastructure, higher post-production losses, and lack of accurate or timely information system. So in this regard, the first issue is regarding the regulation of the markets themselves. And as we know that under the present APMC Acts, only the state governments are permitted to set up the markets. And the Act requires that the farmers' produce be sold only at regulated markets through registered intermediaries. And further, the Essential Commodities Act allows the central as well as the state governments to produce restrictions on the storage and movement of commodities which are deemed essential by the governments. So these regulation of the markets are themselves a problem in the agricultural marketing. Now, such kind of regulations have affected the private sector investment in the agricultural marketing infrastructure. And such restrictions also create artificial barriers and unnecessarily obstruct the free flow of agricultural commodities in India. And accordingly, the focus of the government has so far been on regulating rather than facilitating the agricultural trade. And the restrictions which are imposed by the APMC Acts and the Essential Commodities Act restrict the free flow of agricultural commodities in India. Further, there is fragmentation in the agricultural marketing structure in India. And there are about 2,500 regulated APMCs and around 5,000 sub-market yards which are regulated by the respective APMC Acts in India. Now, apart from that, there are thousands of rural markets or Grameen Hearts. And due to this fragmented marketing infrastructure, the agricultural commodities pass through multiple middlemen and traders who are operating in these APMCs. And this leads to the escalation in the cost of prices and prevents the farmers from getting remunerative prices for their farm produce. Now, in an ideal situation, the farmers should be allowed to sell their produce anywhere throughout India based on the prices which they get. And this can significantly improve their bargaining position and enable them to earn more incomes on their produce. And hence, the present fragmented marketing infrastructure goes against the interest of both the farmers as well as the consumers. So there is a need to develop an integrated domestic market by removing all the existing agricultural trade related barriers. Now, besides these hurdles which are created by the APMCs, there is issue of lack of access to these APMCs themselves. Now, adequate number of markets should be set up closer to the agricultural fields so that the farmers have access to APMCs. And this leads to decrease in the transportation cost for the farmers and also cuts down the post-harvest losses. And accordingly, the National Commission for the Farmers had recommended that each APMC should serve a market area of around 80 kilometers and it should be available to the farmers within a radius of 5 kilometers. However, if we look at the existing marketing structure, we find that an average APMC in India serves an area of around 450 square kilometers. And it highlights the poor access of the farmers to these APMCs. And on account of this, the farmers are forced to sell their produce at lower prices outside the APMCs to the intermediaries. So this highlights that the APMCs are not even accessible to the farmers because of the large area that they serve. Again, there is issue of imposition of multiple fees in the APMCs. Now, the APMCs charge market fee for the buyers as well as licensing fee from the traders. And apart from that, they also charge licensing fee from other agents such as the warehousing agents and loading agents, etc. And these multiple fees are estimated to be around 15% of the value of agricultural produce in some of the states. And these charges imposed have a cascading effect on the prices of the commodities, which adversely affect the end consumers. Further, the present agricultural marketing system is against the interests of the small and the marginal farmers. Now, almost 85% of the farmers in India are small and marginal farmers. And these farmers with lower marketable surplus find it difficult to aggregate their produce and sell it to the APMCs through auction. And hence, these farmers resort to sell their produce to local agents and traders at a much lower price. Further, another issue regarding the agricultural marketing infrastructure is that there is poor infrastructure of the APMCs. So even though the APMCs earn regular revenue through the imposition of mandi tax, the infrastructure in the APMCs such as the godowns, cold chain infrastructure, etc. continues to remain quite poor. And this leads to improper storage and consequently higher post-harvest losses. And most of the APMCs have not been able to set up electronic auction platforms, which are quite important for offering the remunerative prices to the farmers. And finally, there is higher post-harvest losses, and according to a recent study, the total estimated loss in India is around rupees 92,000 crore. And the higher post-harvest losses could be attributed to fragmented market, lack of access to proper storage, and poor handling and transportation of the agricultural farm produce. So these are some of the problems or issues with the present agricultural marketing structure in India. Now, in this regard, let us look at what are the important initiatives that have been taken by the Government of India for handling the issue of agricultural marketing. Now, as we have seen that there are various issues which impact the agricultural marketing structure in India. So in this regard, the Government of India has recently created a Model Agriculture Produce and Livestock Marketing Act 2017. And this Model Act has been developed by the Ministry of Agriculture. And the Government of India has been pursuing the state governments to modify their respective APMC acts along the lines of this Model Agriculture Produce and Livestock Marketing Act 2017. So in this regard, let us look at what are the salient features of this Model Act which has been prepared by the Ministry of Agriculture. So first is that it provides for the freedom to the farmers to sell their produce outside the APMCs to the exporters, processors and end consumers. And we note that such kind of freedom is restricted under the existing APMC acts of the state governments. Further, it permits the private sector entities to establish new markets for the agricultural produce in any area which was earlier restricted by the respective state governments' APMC acts. Further, it also seeks to do away with the multiple levies, and instead it imposes a single levy of market fee on the sale of notified agricultural commodities in any market area. So it tends to do away with the cascading impact of multiple fees which are levied in the agricultural mandis. Further, it does away with the need for multiple licensing requirements for the traders, and also it has proposed licensing of market functionaries which would allow them to operate in multiple markets. However, most of the states have not fully complied with the provisions of the Model APLM Act, and there has been general reluctance on the behalf of the states to amend their APMC acts to the tune of this Model Act which has been prepared by the Ministry of Agriculture. Further, it is being said that the provisions of this Model Act would not lead to the creation of a national or state level common market for the agricultural commodities. And this is because this Model Act states that even when the buyers are buying the agricultural produce outside the APMC area, they are still required to pay the APMC charges. And this acts as a barrier for the creation of integrated domestic market in India. Further, the Government of India has initiated the National Agricultural Market or the ENAM. So in order to integrate the agricultural markets throughout the India, the Government of India has set up the National Agricultural Market or NAM in 2016. And it is a pan-India electronic trading portal which seeks to network the existing APMCs through a virtual platform to create a unified national market for agricultural commodities. And thus this ENAM platform promotes better marketing opportunities for farmers to sell their produce through online, competitive and transparent price discovery system and online payment facility. Now, even though the central government has started this ENAM platform, there are some challenges which are being faced in the implementation of this ENAM portal. Now, to implement the ENAM, every state government has to first amend its APMC Act to make a provision for the electronic auction as a mode of price discovery and allow a single license across the state and have the market fees levied at a single point. However, as we note that most of the states have failed to carry out these amendments, and thus the ENAM portal has not been able to provide benefits to all the farmers across India. So even though the central government has been coming up with various model initiatives, the state governments have been showing reluctance in adopting these initiatives. Similar such initiative is the initiative of contract farming. And the contract farming agreement is an agreement between the farmers and the buyers, such as an MNC, wherein the buyers provide for necessary inputs such as the seeds to the farmers, and the farmers in turn agree to sell their produce at a predetermined price. And in this regard, the Model APLM Act provides for contract farming agreement to reduce the barriers to agricultural trade and ensure remunerative prices to the farmers. Now, although the Government of India has provided for contract farming under the APLM Act, it faces multiple issues and challenges when it is implemented by the state governments. And in this regard, most of the state governments have failed to provide for contract farming in their APMC acts. And due to this, most of the time such an agreement is more of informal agreement between the farmers and the MNCs. And due to such informal nature of the agreements between the farmers and the MNCs, the interests of the farmers are not protected. And it has been observed at times that in order to cut their transaction costs, the MNCs prefer farmers who own huge land rather than small and marginal farmers. And hence the interests of the small and marginal farmers are not taken care of because the state governments have failed to provide for contract farming in the APMC Acts. So this also highlights that the benefits of the contract farming has been reaching to only limited big farmers, and it has not been able to reach the small and the marginal farmers. Further, another initiative is related to the farmer producers organizations or the FPOs. And these FPOs are an entity formed by the primary producers, for example, the farmers, milk producers, etc. And it provides for the sharing of profits or benefits amongst the members of such farm producer organizations. Now, the small and marginal farmers do not have the large marketable surplus, and hence the formation of these FPOs by these farmers increases their bargaining powers and avoids the long chain of intermediaries to sell their produce directly to the end consumers. Now, in this background, the Union Budget of 2018 and 19 has announced a 5-year tax holiday and a small credit guarantee fund of rupees 100 crore for promotion of such farm producer organizations. And also the central government has been encouraging the states to directly support the FPOs through various schemes. Again, we note that the Government of India has launched a new umbrella scheme which is known as the PM Asha or the Pradhan Mantri Annadata Aay Sanrakshan Abhiyan. And this scheme has been launched by the Government of India to ensure the benefits of MSP reach the poor and the small and marginal farmers. So by implementation of this scheme, it is expected that this would prevent the distressed sale of the commodities by the farmers and enable the government to fulfill its stated objective of doubling the farmers' income by the end of 2022. Again, the budget of 2018 and 19 had proposed to set up the Grameen Agricultural Markets or the GRAMs. And these were aimed at enabling the farmers to sell their agricultural produce without any restrictions which they presently encounter in the form of APMC imposed restrictions. And in this regard, the Government of India has declared its intent to develop and upgrade the existing 22,000 rural hearts into Grameen agricultural markets. And these grams will be linked electronically to the e-NAM. And further, they will be exempted from the regulations of the APMC Acts, which will provide farmers the facility to make direct sale to the consumers and the bulk purchasers. So these are few initiatives that have been taken by the Government of India so far. So in this article, we have looked at the various aspects of the agricultural marketing structure in India, and also we have looked at the various problems which are faced by the agricultural marketing infrastructure in India. Further, we have looked at the important initiatives that have been taken by the Government of India for resolving the issues with the agricultural marketing sector in India. So in this line, we note that India needs to enhance the production and productivity of agricultural produce in a sustainable manner so as to ensure the food and nutritional security. And that is why creation of an efficient and integrated domestic agricultural market is quite vital for the benefit of the economy. And this marketing system needs to address the challenges of high post-harvest losses and storage losses. Again, it also needs to address the issues of high marketing costs, inadequate market or procurement centers, and efficient storage and distribution of produce across the country. Further, the domestic agricultural market in India needs to be integrated with the foreign markets to ensure optimum benefits for the farmers. And the agricultural production has to keep pace with the population growth, consumers' preferences, and demand in the domestic and international markets by adoption of appropriate policies of market-led production. So some of the issues that we have discussed in this article are very important for us from the General Studies paper 3 in the mains examination. So do go through this, and with this let's take up the next news article now. Now this article on page number 13 reads that the United States of America has blacklisted 24 Chinese firms and companies which were part of the construction and military actions related to the disputed islands in the South China Sea. And we note that China has been asserting itself in the South China Sea through its conception of the 9-dash line. Now, although this particular news article is not important, but the South China Sea dispute is very important for us from the exam point of view. And this can be a very important aspect for us from General Studies paper 2 point of view under the topic International Relations. Now, we have already covered the various aspects of the South China Sea dispute in a previous DNS video. So let us revise from that video different aspects of the dispute in the South China Sea and what are India's interests in this particular sea. Now we note that Indo-Pacific in general and South China Sea in particular has recently emerged as the geopolitical center of gravity. And the importance of South China Sea lies in the 1/3 of the world trade which transits through this sea. Further, it has rich oil and natural gas resources, and it accounts for about 10% of the world's fishery. However, this South China Sea has recently become a region of contestation among the coastal states which surround it. So as you can see in this map, the location of South China Sea and the countries which are surrounding this South China Sea. So mainly it is surrounded by China, Vietnam, Philippines, and various other countries. And accordingly, all these countries have been asserting their rights in the South China Sea's waters. However, it is the China which has asserted itself to be the most important power in the South China Sea. And it has claimed about 90% of the area of South China Sea with its conception of the 9-dash line. So in this map, you can see that China has asserted its rights on 90% of the South China Sea by conceptualizing this 9-dash line. So it covers mainly the 90% of the South China Sea region. Further, besides China, the United States of America has increased its military presence in the region under the concept of freedom of navigation operations. And it has done so in order to enforce the rule-based navigation of high seas, which is in accordance with the UN Convention on Law of Seas. And the principle of freedom of navigation under the UN clause provides for free movement of vessels in the high seas. So this has increased the military presence of United States of America in the South China Sea. Now, besides these military powers, Japan has also asserted its rights as a result of the disputed Senkaku and Diaoyu Islands. Further, the Philippines, Vietnam have emerged as regional players and they have asserted their rights in the Spratly and the Paracel Islands. So in this map, you can see all these important locations which have been contested amongst various countries. So for example, the Pratas Island, the Paracel Island, the Spratly Islands, the Scarborough Shoal, and the Senkaku and the Diaoyu Islands. So all these locations are important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. Now, besides these contested islands between different countries, there are other players which include Malaysia, Indonesia, and Brunei. Now, what is the power game that is going on in the South China Sea? So we see that Indo-Pacific has emerged as the center of gravity of geopolitics, and the United States of America has increased its presence in region both in terms of economics and the military presence. Further, China in the past decade has challenged the hegemony of US in the region by asserting its dominance through the 9-dash line, claiming the South China Sea to be its territorial waters. And China has also increased its military presence, which has resulted in confrontations with the littoral states like the Vietnam, Philippines, Malaysia, etc. Now, in this background, various concerns have been raised regarding the future of Indo-Pacific region because of the transformation of relationship that is going on between US and China because of the assertion of China in the South China Sea. Further, the Chinese assertion is visible in its ballistic missile tests which were conducted recently in the South China Sea. Now, due to the impact of COVID-19, US might reduce its presence in the South China Sea which will further embolden China's intentions. So, in this power game that is going on between South China Sea and the transformation in the power game which is being witnessed because of the COVID-19 pandemic in this sea, let us look at its relevance for India. Now, India and Southeast Asian countries, mainly which are part of the ASEAN, have always treated the South China Sea as a global common. And accordingly, the Chinese claim on the South China Sea as its territorial waters does not stand the scrutiny of the global commons. Further, it has acted as an important sea lane of communication historically, and India had its trading presence from Kedah in Malaysia to Guangzhou in China. Further, we note that India's trading relationship and partnership with the ASEAN countries has been increasing. So, in this background, the security of South China Sea is very important for India's interests. And we note that nearly $200 billion of our trade passes through the South China Sea. And also, many Indian citizens study, work, and invest in ASEAN countries as well as China, Japan, and Republic of Korea. So, in this background, it can be clearly said that we have stakes in the peace and security of this region in common with the others who reside this region. And as such, the freedom of navigation as well as other normal activities with the friendly countries are essential for our economic well-being. Now, some of the points that we have discussed here have been highlighted by a former diplomat of India. And he further says that regional arrangements will become even more important for our economic recovery and rejuvenation due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And if India intends to think global and act local, India has to be part of the global supply chain in the world's leading growth region for the next half century. And for this, India needs to play a proactive role in regional arrangements like the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. And because the value of such agreements goes beyond the economic gains that they generate for India or the region. So this means that India needs to be a part of the various regional arrangements, and they can be very important for India in pursuing its interests in the region, and especially in the South China Sea, which is a very important region for India from its security, both economic as well as territorial. Now, on this article on page number 10, the chairman of Rajya Sabha, M. Venkaiah Naidu, has written an advisory to the chairpersons of the parliamentary standing committees. And in this, he has advised them to ensure the confidentiality of the panel meetings in various parliamentary standing committees. Now, earlier, the Speaker of the Lok Sabha had also communicated such an advisory to the chairpersons of the parliamentary standing committees. So, in this regard, let us look at the Rule 270 of the Lok Sabha from our preliminary examination point of view. Now, according to the Speaker of Lok Sabha, the Rule 70 of the Lok Sabha deals with the power to send for persons, papers, and records. And in this, he had said that. Now, he quoted this rule because the Congress MP Dr. Shashi Tharoor had summoned the Facebook on the parliamentary panel on information and technology. And this move of Shashi Tharoor was opposed by the BJP MPs. And they had written to the Speaker that this violates the Rule 270 of the Lok Sabha. Further, the chairman of the Rajya Sabha, M. Venkaiah Naidu, has also said that as per the rules, meetings of the committees are confidential. And it is not permissible for a member of the committee or anyone who has access to its proceedings to communicate directly or indirectly to media any information regarding its proceedings. And if such a violation takes place, this would be tantamount to breach of privilege of the House. Now, this Rule 270 of the Lok Sabha provides that a committee shall have power to send for persons, papers, and records. However, the committee shall do so provided that if any question arises whether the evidence of a person or the production of a document is relevant for the purpose of the committee, the question shall be referred to the Speaker, and whose decision on this shall be final. So, the final authority in this case of summoning a person, paper, or record in a committee is that of Speaker. Now, this rule also provides that the government may decline to produce a document on the ground that its disclosure would be prejudicial to the safety or the interest of the state. So, an important thing that needs to be understood is that if any question arises whether the evidence of a person, paper, or record in a parliamentary standing committee is relevant for the purpose of the committee or not, such a question shall be referred to the Speaker. And in this case, the decision of the Speaker will be final. And also production of such documents can be refused by the government on the ground of safety and the interest of the state. So basically, as the Congress MP had summoned the Facebook in the parliamentary committee meetings, this move has been opposed by the Speaker of the Lok Sabha based on the Rule 270, and this is because the decision of the Speaker in this case is final. Now, in the static portion of the polity, you might have learned about the parliamentary committees. So, in today's PDF, you will find the details of these parliamentary committees that exist in the Rajya Sabha as well as the Lok Sabha. With this, we conclude today's discussion. Now, let's take up the question for the day.